Oh, it's we're rolling.
Where's makeup? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you focus.
So here we are. I'm all excited. I'm gonna be a little bit icy. I may have to see if there are brakes for this bad boy. Oh wow.
I have to move on these things because they just.
Yeah, this is okay. We're gonna have to
It's
maybe
core-
demo
it's
some
core
cross
workout
training
over
today.
here.
Yeah. So basically, we have put this together, a Swim Oz conversation, looking at various really informal ways to just kind of exchange information. Technically, the definition of conversation is a talk, especially an informal one, between two or more people in which new ideas are exchanged. And that's kind of what led me to having a series. We did our first one on open water versus pool swimming, looking at this one taking advantage of it being spring and lots of mountain bikers in town and cycling activities getting ready to start up and that sort of thing, and kind of reaching out to you guys, and I'll share y'all's backgrounds here in a second, and kind of thinking about how we can collaborate and learn from each other and kind of continue a conversation that maybe we've had at a certain point, which I think we have all had, and then share that with a broader audience. So that's kind of what has the backstory on the Swim Oz conversation, and kind of where the cross-training piece of this has come from. I'll go ahead. I think what I'd like to do is I'll just kind of give you guys, I had them all homework assignment of sending me your bios, which was lovely. I love learning about my friends, and it was harder for some than others, I think, but it was all great information. And then I'd love to hear kind of a little extra about why you think sharing some information on kind of your cross-training story and some of that, just a little bit, don't give it all away, but just a little bit of that. So be thinking on that as I'm kind of running through and introducing you guys. This actually works out great. Y'all are sitting in order. This is fantastic for me. We'll start out with Rich Drew. You moved here
Almost 4 years ago.
Almost 4 years ago, and
Yeah.
I feel like we met fairly
Very
quickly. So through you, and then through Dex, and just continued conversations from that. But Rich is a former pro cross-country and enduro mountain bike racer. He grew up playing many sports, including baseball and football. A love for strength training developed in high school and really carries on to this day. Having a solid strength and CrossFit background has really helped him ascend up the ranks as soon as he started racing mountain bikes. So I look forward to hearing a little more about that. He's currently traveling the country, really all over the place, doing the Ride series, mountain bike skills clinics, and runs the Rich Drew YouTube channel, which I've watched a handful of those, some in parts. And I feel like I'm in the middle of the conversation between you and your brother. Those are a riot.
People seem to like those.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed those.
We're gonna get more.
Keep
We
doing
have a
keep
whole
doing them.
series that's coming this year.
Excellent. So if you like to listen to podcasts or watch YouTube stuff, I encourage you to follow that one. And is it the Rich Drew YouTube
Just Rich
channel?
Drew, just the name, Rich Drew. That's it.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good YouTube name, but
It is what it is.
Yeah.
We'll take
whatever.
it.
Yeah, it works.
Awesome. So thank you for me.
Of course. Excited.
Good. And then next up we have John Robertson, and you and I met via bikes. I was working for Bike NWA at the time, doing some part-time stuff, working on some safety things and that sort of thing. And you came in and were doing some bike fits and some cross-training stuff with some endurance folks. And I think we had a conversation about endurance athletes and nutrition, if I remember right, which I still have a painful amount of things I need to learn in regards to that. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit about that tonight. John is described by his clients as a holistic coach, addressing sports psychology, diet, biomechanics, PT, strategy, and tailored workouts. His goal is to equip to the point of working himself out of his job. And I'm gonna stop there for a second because 110%, like every client that I get to interact with on a triathlete basis, open water basis, I'm like, guys, I wanna give you all the knowledge and just turn you free into the world. So I was really excited to see that because I'm like, I feel ya. He says, I mostly coach coaches and leaders. John is an exercise physiologist, educated at Baylor University, where he was a scholarship athlete in track and field. There, he was mentored by the former head Olympic physiologist for the U.S. and a celebrity chef turned nutritional chef for a 2-year internship. My daughter would love to pick your brain on some of that. He has been coaching and teaching for the last 14 years domestically and abroad. He has been coached by some of the greatest minds in sports. John really struggled in school from dyslexia and was not naturally athletic at all. He had to be extremely diligent and teachable. He has proven his athletic prowess consistently in track and field, swimming, and cycling, most notably narrowly qualifying for the Olympic trials in the 800 meter. Well done, man. That's awesome. Yeah. Fast. And then Betsy. And Betsy and I go way back, like little kid way back.
I told my mom that I was doing this. She was like, I remember Bonnie Linebacker.
I did not know that.
Yes. See, we're all learning things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we got reacquainted again on a bike.
Yep.
There just seems to be a theme happening tonight. And I remember just thinking, God, you look so familiar. And I couldn't place it. I'm like, did I give you swimming lessons? Did I give your kids swimming? Like I couldn't figure it out. And I think we finally were like, that's who you are, kind of thing. It was really cool because it had been about probably a 30-year hiatus since we had seen each other. So it had been a hot minute. So Betsy learned how to swim soon after learning how to walk, which is the best time to learn how to swim. And from then on, she spent her childhood competitively swimming. At age 12, she was the youngest swimmer in the state to qualify for regions in the 15-meter swim, which swimmers call that the mile, which we all know it's really not a mile, but in the swimming world it is a mile, because swimmers are a little crazy if you didn't already know that. It was her very first time that she had swam that she actually qualified for regionals. Yeah, that's awesome. From then on and throughout high school, she spent 4 hours a day, 6 days a week training for distance events, and thus creating an endurance fitness base that has helped propel her through ultra marathon distance mountain bike races, half and full distance Ironman races. Today, she enjoys moving her body in a variety of ways, in the pool, on the trails, by foot and by bike, and in the gym. So there's a question on here that I very much so looking forward to hearing a little more about that, but we'll get to that part in a minute. So that's kind of a little bit about who you're going to be hearing from tonight. I do want to just very briefly say thank you to the Ledgers for hosting us. We're really pleased to be here, so yay. And then also a big thank you to Bike Rack Brewing. We've got some beer beverages back there, so grab one on your way out, stick around and enjoy a drink or two when we're all done. So yay. Clap, claps. All right, I'll start with you.
Okay.
What are you kind of, thinking about? Why are you kind of excited to share a lot tonight about cross-training stuff?
You know, I thought a few different things to say, but as I was sitting here and as you were asking that, one thing popped in my mind, and I think it's cross-training and strength training is actually the reason I'm sitting here. So when I stopped to think about it, yeah, it's based on what I've been able to do on a bike, but I think what I was able to do on a bike when I started racing mountain bikes competitively was directly correlated to my fitness level. And it was a really interesting thing because when I showed up to my first cross-country race, everybody looked at me and they're like, who is this dude? You know, I had a cut-off jersey and baggy shorts, and I was
Not
20,
about what you wear.
30. Well, I was much larger than everybody else, and I remember that being something that resonated to me. And then the more I got into competitively racing, more people would say to me, dude, you need to cut 20, 30 pounds of muscle off. And I remember saying to them, I disagree, because strength is strength. I'm stronger than you, and I'm a better athlete than you, and I'm a better bike rider than you. That means I'm gonna win. And all of a sudden that started happening, and people realized, wow, wait a minute, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's something to not being as light as I possibly can and breaking a collarbone when I fall over. So I think that piece of it is pretty important. If you want to excel at any given endeavor, I think being more athletic, being stronger is going to help. But I think another ancillary benefit is you'll be better at life if you're stronger. So, how Betsy said, I like to move a lot of different ways. And I think that's the key. You don't have to get so fixated on any one thing. And that's why I'm excited to hear their insight on this topic.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes.
John, how about you?
I agree with Rich on that. You know, power is power, and people that are more athletically, essentially 9 out of 10 times an athlete beats a purist, and that was what he did.
I love that statement.
And so I was actually a purist, and I had to grow up and to become an athlete, and I had to go get around athletes and watch what they did and kind of develop those things. Baseball is a really great foundation for developing athleticism. Swimming is a really great body integrative exercise. I did gymnastics and swimming, and that got me a lot of those abilities. And so what happens is that we tend to specialize in a sport too early. And good thing is we can go back later in life and add a little diversity in there. But the health of the athlete is they're going to become much more durable if we approach them from what I call athlete first. Not, I'm a cyclist or I'm a swimmer or I'm a this. It's like, no, you're an athlete, and you're an athlete because you have a body. And so we want to bring all those attributes up so that they can function and have a good time and not blow their bodies up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, growing up as a swimmer, I did spend quite a lot of time in the pool, but we would, every day out of the 3 hours that we trained, 2 in the morning and 2 after school, an hour of that was in the weight room from the time we were 12. And it was, really working on land drills, functional fitness, strength training, to be able to, we're moving our bodies, or I was moving my body in a certain way repetitively, right? Like a cyclist, it's very linear, but being able to make our limbs and our muscles and our tendons and our joints work in other ways was important too, to our overall health and our joint health. And I recognize that, having a knee injury when I was in high school, I was a breaststroker also, and just that whip kick over and over and over again, there was a direct correlation to strength training, direct. So I knew that, I grew up that way, but later in your adult life, when I hired a triathlete coach, and I was like, well, all I want to do is swim, run, and bike. Like, you're telling me that I need to do functional strength training. Like, I knew why I needed to do it, but it didn't click in until I started having the niggles, and all of a sudden.
I learned what that word was the other day. I'd never heard it before.
Yeah, I know. I think only
I
runners
thought she
use
said
it.
a bad word.
Well, and that, yes, right? This goes to a whole conversation. What was the definition? Nagging and just a twingy, I think was the word. But anyway, I was like, wait, what? Who? Yes, that's what a niggle is.
Yeah. But then
I've never heard that.
Right? Yeah. Anyway,
you go back to the gym, and then all of a sudden they're not bothering you anymore.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and kind of hop in. I have a handful of sort of prepared questions and kind of things to kind of let you guys elaborate on. Some of it's just for one of you, but feel free to chime in. This is casual. If there's something that you're like, oh my gosh, I really, please share. And then we'll open it up at the end for audience Q&A. So, Rich, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned a love for strength training. Can you tell us kind of where did that start? Like, how old were you? What was it? What was the reasoning behind it?
Started in high school, so 14, 15. When I moved to Phoenix from Southern California, I didn't have any friends, and I played baseball, raced BMX, raced motocross, but
Do you have any friends now?
I got a couple, thankfully. I found a few. But when I moved to Phoenix, everybody played football, and I'd never cared about football, but I thought, okay, if I'm gonna fit in with everybody who play
Right.
football, so you play football, and I got into playing football, and as you grow playing football, strength training is a key piece of that. Well, then I got a job at the gym, and it just that's where it started. And it was more bodybuilding then. And it was funny because I thought, well, I want to be big and I want to be strong and I want to potentially play football in college. Well, I got really big, I got really strong, but I wasn't very mobile. And I wasn't very athletic anymore. And so what's funny was to get back to being athletic, I started racing BMX again. And I showed up at the BMX track about 220 pounds, looked like a linebacker. And
You got pictures of that? wanna
I
see.
do, it was amazing. And I got really athletic very quickly. It was painful and it kind of was eye-opening. And so from there, it was funny, like I transitioned more into like this functional fitness approach. And I remember one day I was in the gym training and just kind of doing my thing and somebody said, hey man, you doing CrossFit? And I looked at this person, I said, what the heck is CrossFit? Like I never even heard of it. And that was kind of the infancy of that whole thing. So I always appreciated the science behind strength training, and I was never very strong. I was athletic, but lacking strength. I had to find better ways to do it, and we got more into CrossFit. We trained at an amazing gym in Dallas, and it was so fun for me because I had to be much more cerebral than a lot of the other athletes there. There was a lot of amazing athletes, and there were certain workouts that we would do that I know I would be able to do really well because I would think my way through it. And that strategy was all part of that, I don't know, that love for fitness. It wasn't just brute strength and muscling through things. It was thinking about how to be a little bit more strategic and thinking about me and my athleticism and where my advantages would be and trying to leverage those advantages. Like just simple things, like it was like kettlebell swings. I was really good at swinging kettlebells. Everybody would line up facing one way. Well, when it would be time to swing kettlebells, I'd turn around and look at the person behind me and keep swinging and just look at them and with my eyes tell them, I'm not gonna stop. So you can stop and make it easier on yourself, or you can go till your hands bleed. And so that's just, I was into it. I liked it. So yeah.
That's awesome. John, tell us a little more about your holistic philosophy and kind of how does the purpose of I think you had said, the purpose of food fit into fitness and kind of how that kind of works its way into a cross-training piece.
Well, when I was growing up, the goal was to win, which can mean that you're steadily improving. And when you're doing that, you hit plateaus, and so you have to figure out, well, what's the weak spot? And, so I got to the point where nutrition, I couldn't keep up with the training. And as you said in my bio, I really struggled in school, and I began to discover as I ate better, my intelligence went up, and I was able to really focus in school, and then my recovery increased. I was able to recover about twice as fast, which I don't think steroids will give you that result. And it's something that as Americans, if you're in another country, it might not be as big of a deal, but because here we are malnourished. Think about, we eat a lot of food. Everybody talks about they need to eat less food, and it's like, no, actually you need a lot more nutrients. And Dr. Cooey, he was also, or is also, a cellular chemist, and he began to recognize with all of our modern diseases, they had distinct nutrient deficiencies. And so getting people nourished is a big deal. And, you know, yeah, you become more efficient with nutrition as you become better, but you also run through a lot more nutrients. So as I found that nutrition made more of a difference than, like, what we tell athletes now is you can eat fitness. You can literally eat fitness. You can actually change your mitochondrial density from just what you eat, which is your engine in your body. And so, but it's also the least likely thing for people to actually change.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell them if they can change their diet, they can do anything. And so we'll have them do that. Now the other detail is that the other place that I get the most results is with their head game, their psychology. He was already demonstrating details that I like to help these guys with. But the thing that I found is that basically your brain is 2% of your mass if you're a normal weight person. Maybe not a 220-pound BMX racer, but
With a small brain.
yeah, still the same size brain, just more body. But 2% of your mass, and it burns 20 to 30% of your energy. So out of any other organ, it's basically burning 10 to 15 times more energy. And so if we're malnourished, our brain can't function optimally, and we use our brain for everything, not just sports. And so neuromuscular fatigue is a real big problem. It's actually the weakest link in the system as far as recovery goes. And strength is mostly from your brain. And so if you have that better increase of ability to activate the muscle, we actually found in the lab that you can contract the muscle artificially.
You've been sitting still for too long.
You can contract the muscle artificially, more externally. And so again, the ability to send voltage to the muscle to get it to contract is a big thing that as you develop in fitness, your body has the ability to produce more voltage. Well, that voltage is also what you use to think. It's also the same voltage you use to actually heal your body. You actually have to send voltage potential to an area that's injured for the resources that are needed to boost that. So we have this conversation about people will come to me and they'll be like, well, I want to lose weight. And I'm like, you don't have any energy, do you? I'm like, well, yeah, how do you know? Like, we're going to get your energy up, and then all those other details will take care of themselves. But they basically are describing low battery. If I can get their battery voltage up, things like depression, inflammatory diseases, and of course athletic ability, basically all get better.
Yeah.
So it's just this conversation that not a lot of people click with sports, but when you really run into those situations where you want to get better, but you're not, you have to start to begin to think out of the box. Well, what areas am I not doing? Because people come in there and they assume, well, I did this one thing, I go to workouts, and I'm going to get better. And it's like, yeah, but if you're really stressed at home, if you're malnourished, if you don't have a foundation to even be able to show up and use your body correctly, then there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just been a pursuit of like, I can't do it was just never an option. You just have to just go figure it out. So.
Yeah, I love that you use the word foundation, because I come from this as a swimmer primarily, and now I'm getting older and doing other things that are equally as crazy as swimming.
Which swimming is a great cross training for non-swimmers.
Everything, absolutely, yeah. Exactly. And looking at, so right now I'm currently training for a half Ironman. And so, a little bit. It's been actually kind of fun, but that's a whole nother conversation that we may have to have next.
Sports are fun?
Sports are fun. That's it. Being active is fun. But I look at, it's almost like a tripod. If you do take your triathlon, you're swim, biking, and running, right? But the foundation that you have for each leg is so crazy important. It's the mental aspect of it. It's the nutritional aspect of it. It's what kind of stress are you under on other things? And, all of those pieces, I feel like, play a major role in that foundation. And then it's the actual activity itself, if you will, that can be, those three legs, whether it's CrossFit or walking or cycling or, any of the other activities that you can kind of utilize and do as cross training. So that I don't know, you guys, that's my favorite word so far tonight. No pressure.
No, I figured that word would come from him. He's thinking on a higher level than I am.
It's because he might be eating
It's your
better.
diet.
It is my diet.
It's too many bagels.
When people are like, hey, wow, that was pretty intelligent what you said, and I'm just like, I just thought about it longer than you did.
That's awesome. Betsy, you mentioned in your bio that you basically learned to walk and immediately learned to swim. But tell me where you really felt like your fitness kind of started for you.
I mean, it started when the coach dropped me off the diving board at 18 months and I sunk and my mother is about to scream and jump in and she said I just floated to the top like this and never got out of the pool.
You just left it from the
literally
get-go.
and I remember being motivated by my mom she would promise me like a mini Care Bear if I went to swim practice 5 days that week. And I was like 6, right? I swam all the time. And I loved it, but also there's something about swimming that is a very individual sport, because you're not talking, you're not socializing, it's you in the pool. And yes, there's relays, and that's about the only time when it really becomes a team effort, but other than that, it's very individualistic, and I appreciated the solitude in the pool, and I appreciated, I don't know, I just had a talent for it, and I think my grandfather, I just have always had an endurance background, it just was natural for me, and so I think the athletic part is just something that I've grown up with and always identified with.
Yeah, I think that having started so young and then having a good genetics, good genes do help, but then you
My
kept loving it.
grandfather was 6'5", he was All-American football, baseball, basketball, and I think I got his
Captain of the chess team.
Love it. My
Astronaut.
parents were not athletes.
It may have skipped a generation, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I think it's skipping the next one, but we'll see what happens.
That's funny. What were some areas that you focused on for your events that you were participating in, and how did cross training for that help out? You kind of alluded to that a little bit, but
I would skip over my swimming career and just go straight to adulthood and when that became important. And really, even more specifically, when I was training for triathlons, I would sometimes do gym workouts my coach would prescribe. But it wasn't until I tore my ACL and meniscus that I was going to physical therapy on a weekly basis, and 2 years out of it, not even quite 2 years, it's something that it is a steadfast part of my routine. And my coach would tell me this, and I would listen to podcasts, and everyone would say, skip your run workout and do your gym workout. If you're gonna get more gains in the gym than you will by doing your run workout, and I would be like, whatever, I'd rather run, or I'd rather bike, or whatever. And it was until the last 2 years that really it's living proof that I have to do the mobility. I have to do those exercises, and when my knee starts flaring up, it's because I've been swimming. You will be excited to hear. I'm back in the pool to cross train on the days that I need to give my joints a break. My legs I cannot pound my legs 7 days a week. So 1 day a week I hop in the pool and get that, work the niggles out. you know, just
There's
get
so
that.
many good boys.
Yeah.
Start hearing that one.
But it makes
Just
a big
enunciate well.
difference.
It does make a big difference, absolutely. And we're gonna jump into the next piece, which thank you, that was a beautiful opening for injury prevention. I myself am a product of an ACL obliteration. I just busted it in two. And what was interesting, so mine was back in high school, and I was cross training, I was running, and I was in a field. We couldn't find a hole, didn't feel a hole, but my knee just completely buckled. And it was a really interesting process. Went to the doctor, they were like, oh, you sprained it, you're okay. No crutches, eyes, go on about your merry way. Well, part of that diagnosis was that I was so strong in my knee area because we had been doing dry land. Swimmers call it dry land. Because we had been doing dry land and other things. And so all the little bitty muscles, there are tons of little bitty muscles that are right there at the base of your quad. And they were all in great shape. And so they weren't worried because I had the stability still in my knee. And it took a couple months and a couple more continued bucklings, basically, to finally get to the right person to say, hey, go have an MRI. And then we discovered I had a non-existent ACL. And then the PT that went along with it before surgery and the PT that went along with it after surgery. And that physical therapy piece, I think so many people have in their brain that, oh, that's something that I do only after I've been injured, and not relate it to what we're talking about tonight as a cross training piece. And so having, that base of, okay, I'm gonna do a little bit, 5 minutes on doing some hip stuff, 5 minutes on some ankle stuff, 5 minutes on some shoulder stuff. That's only 15 minutes, that's not that big a deal. Oh my gosh, the prevention that it gives you, the strength and the ability to do those other things is really kind of why we're all here tonight. But from an injury prevention, and this, I really do want each of you to kind of touch on this a little bit. And Betsy, I'll just bounce back to you since you kind of got us going on it. But what kind of training did you do in regards to your ACL meniscus issue or any other injuries that you've had? And can you kind of describe a little more detail as to how that helped? Like what did it do for you? What is it doing for you now?
So, I don't know why, but I was on, I broke my knee too. So I did my maximum damage to this knee. And anyway, I was on crutches for 2.5 months. So all of those muscles were atrophied and they had not been used. And then all of a sudden I'm having to refire them neuromuscularly. And so a lot of my PT was just being able to get them activated again. We started with that, like, let's just get it activated, right? And then we can build the strength off of it. But even today, a 1.5 years later, there's still an activation issue. And so doing 15 minutes, you guys, it takes me 15 minutes to run through my exercises that I do that wakes up my glutes, wakes up my hamstrings, make sure that my quad muscles are engaged the right way, and that's it. And I think, if athletes, if we would just, we all say it, but heed the words of your coach and actually do it.
Coaches really do know what they're talking about.
Gee, well, John, I don't know. And how many athletes do you that say that? But that's all it really takes to get it activated. And I can't wait to hear John's opinion on this. But
You ready?
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna take it up one notch. So, essentially, as humans, I'll say for better or worse, we have two modes. We've got a high power mode, we've got a low power mode. And if you are stressed, if you, for whatever reason, believe that you don't have everything that you need, it could be emotional support, it could be, food, it could be you're worried about money, it could be whatever, you will flip into a low power mode, which means that you shut down most of your posterior chain and
Everything you can't see in the mirror.
yeah, exactly. You will, exactly. Your butt mainly, your groin, your arches. You have this posture that's this very distinct, like low power posture, which is also the least attractive. And so when we go into high power mode, our posterior chain clicks in and we stand up straight and our shoulders open up, our hips open up. And so I'm working with people and I'm starting to look at them and we're starting to do activator drills and things like that, and it's still not working great. And I start to ask more questions. What's going on in your world? What's your perception? And I think I said on basically one of the biggest things I deal with is expectation and perception. So those two details are two of the most important details when you're dealing with an athlete. And so I think we have to kind of take inventory of the whole person and kind of recognize, like, hey, sometimes things we need to talk through that aren't just pure X's and O's and movements and things like that, to make sure that they're 100% present. And sometimes you have to just take those audibles and say, hey, let's take a day off. Let's take a week off. We actually found that this is a pretty standard thing, understanding of people have about 21 days of focus. It takes about 21 days to really establish a new habit. And at 21 days, you just start to lose focus. And everybody does it. So we just take a break, And for our ladies, if it's a hormonal, seasonal, or monthly thing, we try to kind of click that we just roll with it biologically. And so I think as athletes, we ignore pain.
It's part of the process, right?
Yeah, we're supposed to be tough, or we medicate it. And actually, the truth is that we learn from pain. Well, that's the better way to say it. And so the athletes that are successful, they're not afraid of pain, but they learn from it and move through it. We've actually found that pain and self-awareness are inversely proportional. So when you have an area that's injured, the muscles that are not activated, as we start to take inventory and do some tests, they have a hard time even describing that joint. Their self-awareness of it is just like really fuzzy. As you bring awareness to that area of the body, then the function returns and the pain dissipates. And so we had this idea of like, I'm scared of pain. It's like, no, the pain is telling you something, learn it, reestablish the connection, and then the function comes back. But that can also be, it's the same for us emotionally. And that's the crux, is the common denominator is that central nervous system. And so if you're really dealing with other emotional pain, things in your life, it will have a net effect of you having a hard time shutting on muscles, basically. And so it's just one of those things that when you get to these elite coaches, they start to have these conversations, they realize this. I got to hang out with Alan Lim. He's pretty famous exercise. Yeah, Scratch, yep. And he's having this conversation because I'm coaching people and I'm like, I'm not coaching like anybody else I know. Well, yeah, these guys are, and they realize like we have to take care of our athletes. Like we have to love them. Like we have to talk to them. We have to eat with them. We got to make sure that they're heard. Like what's going on? How are you doing? Those really personal things, which ladies tend to get a lot of those details better than male athletes. I have to do all kinds of things to get them to open up and talk about their what's going on in their day, or life. But so yeah, PT. All of my strength training is also PT.
Yeah.
And it's always the way we do. I do a lot of one arm, one leg because that's how we do sports. It's also less likely to get injured, at least because some people get injured CrossFit while they're doing the things. And if I can do like one-legged deadlift, for example, I can correct a firing pattern. They can spot themselves because they've got their other leg. They're putting half the force through their back that they would with a two-legged deadlift. But at the same time, because it's off of one leg across your body, they can strengthen their back. And you know, you realize like, oh, that's how people use it. Unfortunately, football is where we think of strength training. A lot of those things are still there. They have very classic injuries that everybody gets. The guys that are really successful, they're not doing strength training like the rest of the NFL. And that's where I like to point out that the guys that are winning in sports are doing something different. If you're doing what everybody else is doing, then don't expect to be extraordinary. And so we like to point out the difference that makes the difference, and we want to again have that conversation of what's unique about you as an individual, and then like when you're doing your workouts, it should be weird to other people. I mean, you were weird, right?
That's weird. Yeah.
You established that, right? And then he's the guy winning, but he had to do things that other people weren't doing.
Yeah.
Most people are unwilling to be different. And the thing is like, well, the guy that won is different.
Yeah.
And so you have to basically begin to own that, be yourself, and you know, move into that uniqueness.
Embrace the uniqueness.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
So.
It's a tough act to follow, sorry.
It is a tough act to follow. Let me frame it. Let me provide some context.
Yeah.
Everything he said, I get it. I'm listening to it and I'm smiling because it resonates with me. I think the challenge for most people is to decipher what he said and what they can do to get to that point.
Oh yeah.
There's this huge gap, and I think that's a very challenging piece, and a lot of people don't understand. And what I've been trying to do, because we get a lot of questions like through YouTube of, dude, strength training, come up with something. And what I try to say is, before you even worry about strength training, just do some mobility.
Yeah.
Like, do a little due diligence about, well, what is mobility? What does it mean to be mobile? And you know, you simply explain to people, we're sitting for the most part all day. Your hips are closed off. If you're riding a bike a lot, your hips are closed off. So it should stand to reason that if you can do some things to help open your hips up, you will then move better. And I think certain people have certain issues, like we're in Sedona for the Sedona Mountain Bike Festival. We're there in the capacity to represent a manufacturer. It's very important. There's a lot of people there. And my piriformis was really tight. So
don't get me started on that.
He was freaked
I
out.
was stressed. So think like upper outside glute.
Yeah.
You had a pain in your ass.
I
Let's just call it what it is.
I had a pain.
I'm a recent recovery from that, so
It's-
I
and-
speak from experience.
Piriformis or pure performance is what it's also called. But it was so tight that it was affecting everything else.
Yeah.
And so I was in a dark place. And so I got out.
And you couldn't do
I basically got out what we'll simply describe as an elevated lacrosse ball, a lacrosse ball on a pedestal. And
That's my favorite.
there was a lot of pain.
Yeah,
There might have been a
I
few
did some
tears.
dry needling, and that was
And that's
amazing.
And so
but
the interesting thing is that when you go to that place that's hurting and you actually increase the pain by sticking a lacrosse ball in your butt,
or a needle.
you increase the awareness of that area of your body, and then the function returns and it begins to take.
Because the inflammation is addressed, and it's going, oh, this is where we need to go because you do hurt. Yeah.
so short term, yes, you're addressing the inflammation there, but I think chronic inflammation is another one.
Oh yeah.
And so like prehab, when we trained at CrossFit Dallas Central, which was not a prototypical CrossFit gym,
Yeah,
we had coaches that were really good, and they understood, and they were good at guiding people. Essentially prehab, do things that ready your body to train the way you desire to train. And I've kept that and tried to do that. Take the time to get yourself ready. And the way I look at it is, I'm gonna crash. So when I ride, there's a time where I will crash. It's not an if, it's a when. And I need to be prepared to deal with that. And it's pretty hard to, in a gym setting, replicate the dynamics of what a crash is gonna be like. And so for me, it's a matter of have enough midline strength, have enough shoulder and like thoracic mobility that when I get whipped off the bike and do things my body doesn't want to do, I can lay there for a second and go, okay, I'm halfway decent, I can get up. And
Well, and I grew up a spaz, so I'm really good at falling and not getting hurt.
it's an art.
It's totally an art.
And I don't think it takes long. I think that's what I'll finish with is a little bit of due diligence in this capacity, like 15 minutes. I think you can carve out 15 minutes. My brother's a prime example, and hopefully he watches this. He has horrible tech neck. So that's an actual thing now. He's
Yeah.
like this.
Whoa.
And he spends, I don't know how much time in the morning and in the evening on Instagram. I constantly get
Yeah.
these different reels from him, and I try to tell him, dude, if you would spend that time fixing your neck and being a little bit
Yeah.
more mobile, your life would be
Well,
way
and it's not even about doing, like putting the phone down and doing something else. If he has to have that, it's embracing where he is, and instead of doing
Yeah,
this,
I tried to tell him to do this, and he
it's,
just
you
he
know,
just goes
it just
low power
all.
mode. Yeah, low power mode.
Power mode.
I'm gonna tell him that.
That's that.
Low power
That's
mode.
your word of the day.
I like to, like, tightness is weakness. It's typically weakness in the antagonist muscle. So hips are, everybody talks about their hips are tight. Well, you're stressed and you're not firing your glutes, which opens up the hips. And so like strength training is actually a mobility thing. I mean, people think about getting stronger, but no, you're getting more flexible. You should
That's
be
how you're
using
doing it, right?
Yeah, to
Yeah.
increase that range of motion, increase the strength through the full range of motion. And whenever you're in any position of the muscle, you've got the whole range of motion to contribute that strength. But a concept that's really important for people to understand on that thing is that which joints are more for mobility and which joints are for stability. And almost everybody that I get is out of phase. They're using their knees for mobility and they're blowing out their knees when they should be very stable joints. The ankle is what should be extremely flexible, and it goes in alternating order. So you have your ankles are for mobility, your knees are for stability, your hips are for mobility, your core is for stability, thoracic is for mobility, and then as you get into your shoulder, you've got mobility and stability. You've got both shoulder blades, and of course you've got your neck for mobility. And so getting those back in phase where they're using their body correctly and together. So that's where we want to talk about body integration, where a lot of, you talked about bodybuilding. Well, the problem is that bodybuilders aren't very effective athletes because they just take all their muscles and work at them one at a time, but they're not collaborating together with their body. And so if you do a kettlebell swing, you're using your whole body to create this, to move that weight the way that it's supposed to. And so,
Bodybuilders are all show, no go.
Yep. So if you ever get some guy wanting to get a fight with you, he's a bodybuilder, you can probably take him.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and as a swimmer, Betsy is spot on. We were in the gym an hour of that 4-hour workout every day, but when I remember the first time my grandmother found out that I was lifting weights, she was terrified. She was like, oh my God. I mean, she just was like, went on and on and on. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, we're low weights, high reps, we're elongating the muscles, and like we had this whole conversation. And I think that was for me, a really kind of, not so much aha moment, but I kind of dig on this, like why I'm doing this and how it's affecting my body and what it's doing to my body and how it's affecting competition and that piece of things. So yeah, cool. We'll see how are we doing on time. I'm gonna skip this one, John, because you actually have already talked about it, and that was the athlete first philosophy piece. And I feel like we've kind of already touched on all of these things. Betsy, I had for you kind of your why and what you're wanting to accomplish with cross training, and feel free to elaborate, but I feel like you've kind of already stepped on the fact that you've continued your PT for a year and a half, basically, at home.
I mean, I feel like if you go through one of those injuries after 40, it's just a part of your life. Like, it's always going to be part of my life. So I've come to grips with that.
Yeah, embrace it.
I've embraced it. Yeah. I think now moving for me, just I'm at the point where I'm not competing anymore, and so I have the ability to wake up and go, I think I'm gonna swim today.
You get to
Or
pick your work.
I get to pick, and I get to pick based on what my body feels like doing, and not what is in Training Peaks.
I'm living on Training Peaks right now, so I'm one and done, so it's all good.
You'll
do
see.
anything for a short period of time. I'll ask you all one quick question from an athlete standpoint, as well as really just as a human. You're highly active people. You have, I assume you have a bit of a social life, a family life. I hate to use the phrase work-life balance, but like, what are some things? What are some tricks that you kind of have either discovered, whether it was a bumpy discovery or have embraced, that have maybe made some of that balance piece a little bit easier? And whoever wants to, I mean, you're giggling, so maybe you
No,
can
I'm
go
not
first.
giggling. I think the discovery piece of it, I think for me, I had a back crash, and John will appreciate the beginning of this, but not the end of this. I've always been very fat fueled for years and years and years. And when I raced cross country mountain bikes, I would do it fat fueled, fat adapted, and people were blown away. It was like pre-race, you got to just cram all this pasta down your throat and all this other stuff. And I would race fast at times, and people just couldn't understand it. I couldn't get into it because they just didn't want to believe it or understand it. And
I went through exercise physiology in school, and they push carbs hard, and there's a bunch of products, and I had to come into that late, and I was basically very offended when I was confronted with fat burners and stuff, and we knew the science. Yeah, no, it was like changing your diet. It's a hard thing, but
I did a half Ironman on water alone.
Yeah, if you're dialed into that pathway and your body will use that as fuel, you're golden. And I was doing that and was working great. Well, I worked all day, I drove, I came here, and I did a invite-only ride on a new trail system that wasn't open, and the only thing they said was nobody crashed. I looked around and I thought, yeah, nobody crashed. So I had my scratch shoes from Allen Lynn in my pocket, and we rode, and I was like a kid in Christmas, just excited, and I never got to those scratch shoes, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up hitting the ground.
Oh,
So coming through a jump line, I blacked out from low blood sugar. Woke
that's
up,
not a pleasant feeling.
not a pleasant feeling, and I woke up thinking, I don't understand, what happened? And I looked over, and I had a grade 5 separation, violent concussion, called her, didn't remember, I'm in Arkansas, I don't know how I got here. And so it was really bad, and that was literally right before we were moving here. So I'm about to have a complete AC reconstruction while we're moving to Bentonville so I can be a bike coach. And it's just all these things were really bad. And I had this epiphany where I just thought, no, mentally, I'm gonna be the best I can. I can only control what I can control. It's done, it's over with. So instead of laboring over the fact that, oh man, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna be sad. I thought, no, I'm just gonna get past it and I'm gonna move on. And that moment has kind of bled into every other part of our life where, as a small business owner, especially now running it together with my wife, there's a lot of difficulties, and I think looking at it, knowing they're going to be there, and maybe this is an athletic mindset, but embrace those challenges and do the best you can, but then be okay dealing with whatever happens. If you don't have control over it, you can't control it. Like, why let it affect you negatively? And I think that piece has helped, and it's not easy. It's really hard to look at it that way, and I think you have to have the social support. You have to have the faith in your ability to do the things you can do to get past those moments. But yeah, I think for me, the mindset piece, finding a way to work on the mindset and really embrace that, because that will then, I think, filter out into everything else physical.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
mind is so powerful.
The mind is the most important. I mean, the battle's won and lost in the mind, and I don't know it's so overlooked. But I mean, I'll talk to people that are stuck, and this happens over and over again, and I'll have a 15-minute conversation with them, and the next time they go out, they'll smash their record because you just changed their expectation. And if they expect to fail, then they create that reality. I mean, it's really simple, but people are stuck in these mindsets, and they worry about stuff that they can't even do anything about, and they don't worry about the things that they can do something about, and then change that and move towards an expectation. If you show up to a race, most people don't expect to win. There's only a few people that actually expect to win. When you actually, and they'll actually tell you, if you just listen. It's when I was at Baylor and I was around Olympians, you listen to these guys and they sound arrogant, and you realize, like, he just did what he told me he was gonna do. And this other guy that was complaining did what he said he was gonna do.
That's exactly right.
And people will tell you exactly what they're gonna do, but they don't know it.
Yeah.
And so beginning to take inventory of what are you saying, what are you noticing? I'll tell my athletes, hey, I want you to notice cool things about the people that you compete with, people that are around. I want you to tell them about it. Because the minute that you talk about it and that you recognize it, you begin to activate that attribute in yourself just by bringing awareness to it. I recommend, I've got execs doing this, they're getting results with their people in business and of course in their athletics. But sports psychology is just solution psychology. It's just like, we don't care what your problem is, but this is how people that are effective think. And you don't just tell somebody they have a problem without giving them a solution. Or I think that's dumb. I guess a lot of people do that. But Elite Minds, it's a great book. Stan Beacham, he's a sports psychologist. And start there. It's a very simple read, and it'll change your life. It'll really help you to begin to cooperate with yourself, because most people are their own biggest.
Yeah, you gotta get out of your own way, right?
Yeah.
I am a big fan of visualization.
Yep.
And we would, as an athlete, and you build up all season long, and then you get that amazing, 8 days, 10 days, whatever, of tapering. You've got a little extra time, and that was where I was first introduced into visualization and the magic behind that.
With daydreaming, you get
It's
in trouble.
amazing.
You get in trouble for it in school. And I
Oh my
tell
gosh,
people,
you're spot on.
When I
The
grew
most-
up swimming, I mean, every night before
Yeah.
race,
Yeah.
I would swim a mile in my mind.
Yeah.
And that is not a quick visualization.
Every-
I mean, I was a sprinter, so mine was pretty quick. But
Yours was, yeah, it was very long. It would take me 20 minutes.
yeah, for sure. But I remember when things like really started kind of getting serious for me in junior high, basically, and like I would lay down to do my visualization with a stopwatch.
Yeah.
And it was when I could see, okay, my goal time is 58 flat or whatever, and I would be hitting it or coming like a hair under it, and it was like, oh, I mean, I have goosebumps. I mean, that's
Okay, so-
silly, like goosebumps.
So
crazy
here's
how
the
powerful
secret,
that is.
and this is where guys can struggle with it a little bit. Okay, so the intellectual part of our brain that we're using to have this conversation is like 2% of, it's some small percentage of 2% of your brain where the intellect happens. Most of the things that make you effective as a person and contribute to sport is subconscious, and then the body cooperating with that. And so the only common language throughout every cell of the body is emotion. So Dr. Cooey was one of the founders of epigenetics, and every cell is affected by your emotional state immediately. And so you visualize, so you create that expectation, and like your subconscious understands dreams, so you communicate in dreams. It doesn't tell you some conversation. So you have this dream state by visualizing, which the rest of the brain gets. And then as soon as you emotionally engage that expectation, then the body's like, why didn't you tell me? Let's do this thing. And people that are successful, they naturally do that. Kids do a great job with that, but for whatever reason, we get too intellectual when we grow up. It's important to have an intellectual conversation, but if you can't articulate what you want and then be able to see that and then be able to emotionally engage that, And so we do that proactively then, rather than reactively, which is what most people do. They just react emotionally as they go through life. And if you want to change something, then you have to go to a space that you've never been before, or maybe you've experienced before and you're trying to get back to it and remember that or imagine what that would be like. So that's the conversation, is what would it be like if your knee worked the way that you wanted it to? And so that's just how
So
we work. And
powerful.
it's very simple. And the thing is that you get into really elite coaches, it's like you think it's gonna be like complex. It's not. It's really simple. And that's like a myth, because I think people are trying to make money or like pretend like it's nobody has access to it. It's like, no, if a 7-year-old child can't understand it, it's probably not necessary. And so, but I will say one thing, as far as practical, fitness is cumulative. Maintenance is a real thing. So you develop 1 or 2 attributes at a time, and then you drop that into maintenance, and then you begin to work on another attribute, 1 or 2. I don't usually do more than 2. Strength training increases aerobic ability by like 12 or 15%. What I found with my athletes is you used to have an off season where you strength trained or cross trained, and then you got away from it as you got into your sport. But I found after about 2 weeks, you lost that advantage. And so I just naturally was maintaining the strength where you may do less. You're not trying to build it, you're trying to keep it activated. And so now we recognize that you have to keep strength activated. So my athletes never stop lifting. That is, it happens all year round, but they don't have to like do all this huge load where they're trying to really build it.
Right, you're not tearing down the muscles and
And
getting
then-
sore from it or whatever.
Yeah, and then once like Rich activated as a kid, or as when he was young, for him to go get if he walked away from weights for a while and then went back, he'd activate it really quickly because he's already established that ability. And so if you've already established an attribute, you activate it very quickly. That's low hanging fruit. And then ones that you haven't activated before, it's going to take more time to establish that. And so I want to have as many of those attributes activated at once to be able to be as effective as possible. But you don't just have to like work. Pro cyclists, they stop off seasoning at some point. Like they'll race into fitness because their body just knows the drill. It's got the fat metabolism. I'm working with a pro right now, a former pro, and he just starts riding, and his ketones are like just 4 like it's just off the charts. Like I never did that much volume. Like I have to really work at it to get it up there, but his body knows the drill. And so that's
set that
Well,
expectation for
the
his
gene
body.
expression, but the epigenetics and all that stuff. Like people who start running very young,
Yeah.
they look like runners when they're older because that gene expression takes them there. Like that's where, like you talked about, don't be so specific. From a young age, you fall into the specificity. Be an athlete. Play spatial awareness. Like when we coach people at our events, they fall into 2 silos: those who were athletes and those who weren't athletes. Those who are athletes, we know right away because they know where their hips are in space. The ones who aren't, you're trying to tell them to do something and they're like Ricky Bobby. They don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's
or you get a swimmer and they're out there running and they're running like this because they're
Stop it. It's probably exactly what I look like. I do feel a little like Phoebe when I run.
I'll go run with you like
You
that.
guys rotate your hips and shoulders together, where runners and cyclists, it's cross. It's opposite.
Oh yeah.
So,
I'm gonna have to, now that I've acknowledged that and understand that, I'm totally gonna use that because I correct my cyclists and my runners all the time because they're so used to getting the majority of their power from that downstroke with their feet. And with swimming, it's not, and we have to, talk about, well, anyway, I could go on and on. This is amazing. What was even the prompt? Kind of holistic
Balance.
human work-life balance stuff. Any things in there that,
I mean, when I was training for, the triathlons and Ironman.
you're crazy.
Oh my God, I was a small business owner at the same time, and I also had like,
overachiever.
3 or 4 year old, and yeah, it was definitely, well, it put a lot of strain, but I was so focused on like overcoming the adversity that I did not recognize
Any of that.
the periphery until it was all over, and actually until my mountain bike accident. I tore my knee up, and I sat in a chair in the mountains for 2 months, and these epiphanies were going off, and it was like, oh, okay, like that's what the balance is. And now it's so much easier, and I have so much more clarity, and you know, it's so much easier just to recognize I don't have a race, you know, that I'm training for, but when I wake up in the morning and my alarm, like this morning, went off at 5 like it normally does, and I had a stacked day of work, and it was like, you know what, I can go pound myself into the sand right now, and I'm gonna not be as sharp and clear, and I'm gonna be exhausted at the end of the day, and which is not gonna lead into the next day very well. Or I can do what my body's intuitively telling me that I need, and it's rest.
Sleep for a minute, or even
It's
just
rest.
lay
I
there
couldn't
and be
even fall
peaceful.
back to sleep, but I rested.
Well,
And
if you do a workout and you're less than, then you train yourself to be less than. We do exactly what we train ourselves to do, but I think so my parents are in diplomacy, so I got exposed to people from all over the world, and you start to realize like how much of the way we think is just our culture. And there's a lot of other places that those athletes are more effective in certain ways because of their point of view. But we're just work. Americans take their value in their output. And so I have to break that in my, because most of the people that are going to come have a sport conversation are overachiever A-type people. And it's like rest, all of our systems have a refractory period. And so I want them to be at that peak level or really fire like optimally, and it's a really fun experience. And then you let them recover, and then you hit it again. You let them recover, and you let them hit it again. But most people are too anxious to let that space come into that situation. So 9 out of 10 times, all I do is add space to their life, and everything comes up.
Yeah.
And so.
Man, you got an easy job.
Yeah, I know. We just prune.
I
Say
like that.
Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
I love it. Any questions? Any last thoughts?
My only thought is there were multiple segues into other conversations. Like
Yeah.
listening to these things, like the mental piece of it, and I've been fascinated recently by the talk of mental health, especially around high-level athletes. And I think that it's a very interesting conversation because I think there's a lot of parallels with everyday people. They put stock in who they are as an athlete at a small local level while they still have a family. And it's sometimes tragic. Like, I feel so bad for some of these people, and you can't just say to them, you're at this level down here, and you're focusing all your energy into this athletic endeavor to the detriment of your family. Like, let it go, relax.
And to the detriment of the sport, one of the things that they bring out in Elite Minds is what we find is people who take identity in their sport, or really anything that they do, are far less effective at what they do. When it's just something you go do and you go have fun, it's an expression of who you are, you're far more effective.
Mm-hmm.
So, because nobody's identity is in one thing.
Yeah.
And if all of a sudden it goes away because you have an injury, you're just lost. And that's the tragedy of these. I mean, guys that win the Olympics had a very high suicide rate. Some of that's because of the drugs they take to get there. But don't take identity in sport, but do sport.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Cross-train your mind.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, I like it. I like it. Any questions? There's a lot to chew on,
Come
gang.
on, some questions. Throw them
This
at me.
I was super excited to put this panel together, and like just side conversations that you and I have had, that you and I have had. I mean, I've had some one-on-one time, not a ton with you, but a little bit. So I knew that this was going to be a really fascinating piece, but this was so fun, at least for me anyway. Everybody's going like this, so.
I think
Yeah.
moving forward, you should ask people for specific questions, because then we can take those questions and each give some input.
Oh yeah,
I think those questions will resonate to a lot of different people.
Absolutely.
I think within those questions, we can unpack a lot of the impediments that people see to
Yeah.
what we talked about.
yeah,
Like we keep bringing it back to the mental piece, but if you can overcome and visualize clearly what you need to do, and it's simple, I think it's much easier for it to get done. And then all of a
Oh,
sudden you take those
100%.
steps and you think,
with
wait a minute.
whatever part, even if
Exactly.
it's just in how you feel about it. I teach all levels of swimming, beginner all the way up to endurance world champion athletes, and it's thinking on the beginner aspect of it, of okay, how do you feel when you signed up for swimming lessons? And half of my beginners were terrified. And it's okay, well, now how do you feel when you come to the pool? Well, high anxiety, I almost didn't come, I almost called the camp, all of those things. And it's like, okay, well, we're gonna start really, really simple. We're gonna start about how you think about coming to swim. And every time you have that negative thought, you're gonna literally say out loud, I like coming to the pool. I enjoy coming to the pool. Whatever thing makes you feel better.
I'm not ashamed to be in a Speedo.
That's it. You will start to feel better about it. And it's that base of it all the way up to your upper echelon podium finishing athletes that are taking the 20 minutes to visualize that whole mile swim, that are taking a 58-second moment to visualize their 100 sprint or whatever.
and what you say. So if you're complaining,
So powerful.
yeah, it uses a different part of your brain. So if you speak, you can kind of like, oh wait, that didn't sound right. That doesn't, like it's flying in your brain like it makes sense, and then you say it out loud and you're like, what was I thinking? And then sometimes you think it's something that's like, what? And then you say it and you're like, that was profound. But what we're saying is so important. And so if you can begin to discipline your tongue to reinforce the desire that was the goal
Yeah.
that was set out there, then you're going to be extremely effective. And that's why, like, what do they say? Life and death is in the tongue. Like, you really have to.
Words matter, thoughts
I
matter.
don't remember if this was a coach or a book or whatever that I read, but I think it was probably my coach, and I was worried about my first half Ironman. I was like, I don't know, like, what if I don't finish, or what if I, and he's like, have you ever quit a workout? Have you ever quit a workout early? And I was like, well, no. And he was like, your mind doesn't know how to quit because you've never done it before. And there's so much truth to that. Like, when you're in so much pain trying to finish a sprint or whatever, the last 5 seconds, don't stop, and your body and your mind won't know what it feels like to stop early.
And people are terrified of things that really aren't scary at all.
Yeah.
So you'll sit there and you'll be like, okay, where's the anxiety? Let's talk about it. Well, I'm worried about this. Okay, what if that happened?
Yeah. Well, that's it. A lot of people, it's water up their nose. Okay, happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's not super pleasant.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And it'll happen again. So,
Happens to me.
that's it. And that's exactly right. I tell them, probably close to once a week I'm getting water up my nose.
Me too.
I just say, okay, well, chlorine's cleaning my sinuses out. It's all good. It's all good. Guys, this was amazing. And I look forward to watching the video and kind of diving into some of the things that I think we've all kind of talked about a little bit. And great stuff. Thank you. Yay. Okay.
Thank you, Bonnie.
That was awesome, guys.
Do we need to
Yeah.